also have Donna and Kelly. We need 3 councillors to be quorate.
Understand that.
It's not the end of the world because we only make recommendations anyway, by and large. So
yeah.
It's largely technical, but yeah, we can't make any decisions.
Yeah. Okay, let's go then. We're live on YouTube. And as I said, apologies for absence. Definitely Joseph, Claudia, and Ken. Although Ken said he may come in later. Are there any declarations of interest?
No.
In that case, let's proceed on that. Public participation. Do you know if there's anyone else looking in, Kath? No, not really. Okay, that's all right. Minutes of the last meeting then. Are we happy to approve that? Does anyone have any issues with them?
Yep, no issues.
In that case, let's go ahead.
Approve, yeah.
Approve. Yep. Thank you. And then first item on the agenda that's substantial is the progress on the electrical vehicle charging projects and also on the structure. Can we then perhaps talk first of all about Mill Meadows, and Fiona would like to talk about Mill Meadows, where we're at on that?
Yes, so a proposal went to the Recreations and Amenities Committee last week to install 4 electric vehicle charging points at Mill Meadows car park. The committee approved that proposal and also asked that Tony and I meet with an alternative potential supplier who had a different possible approach. So we're going to explore what was briefly described in an idea brought in at the last minute, the idea of town-wide revenue generating approaches to electric vehicle charging points, and Tony and I having that meeting on Thursday, and the Recreations and Amenities Committee then delegated to the town clerk looking at the results of that meeting, the decision on which supplier we should use for the electric vehicle charging points at Mill Meadows, because you'll recall we've been working with Joju, who are the sole supplier for the Central Southern Regional Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Framework. That's so great news. I think that the town council's first electric vehicle charging points have been approved to go ahead, but some more work to be done to confirm who the supplier will be so that work can actually begin. And obviously I'm happy to answer any questions about that if anybody wants to know any more.
Any questions for Fiona on that? Can I just say that the alternative supplier that Fiona referred to is linked to EDF, or E.ON as it's known in the UK. So it's an alternative electricity utility in that context. Good morning, Rebecca, how are you?
Morning, Rebecca.
Good morning.
Can we then go on to the...
Can I just ask Tony, before you move on, what sanctions can be applied to non-electric vehicles using those electric, the spaces assigned with charging points?
Well, this probably relates to the SODC consultation, which we submitted comments on, one of which was that it has to be enforced. And if you look at places, particularly in London boroughs, which have got electric vehicle charging points, they actually have usually got parking measures, parking fines that can be applied if someone is parking in an electric vehicle charging point. That doesn't seem to work currently in the Kings Road car park, where there are 2 charging points, and they are often used by people that are without an electric vehicle. But it has to be enforced. That's one issue.
Well, firstly, you need to make sure that the regulations and laws allow you to enforce it, and secondly, you need to go and enforce it. How's the first of those 2 doing?
I've got 2 answers from Patrick and Fiona. Would Fiona like to take the answer first, and then Patrick?
If I may, thank you. Yes, so we would have to get a traffic regulation order in order to be able to enforce electric vehicle restrictions on those spaces, and the Recreations and Amenities Committee also approved that we could do that. So the process has started for that to take place.
Great.
Patrick?
It's a question actually, and that is, as the car park in Mill Meadows is actually on private land, and I question, is it an adopted road? Because if it's not an adopted road, do we have to get a TRO, or can we apply our own regulations to it?
My understanding is that we do require a TRO. I would also say the experience of other car parks is that, and the recommendation of the Energy Savings Trust is that using really strong and clear signage early on is the best way to start things off, so that people don't get into the bad habit of thinking that those spaces, can be used by other kinds of vehicles. So sometimes, strong signage from the outset can get things off to a better start, and then maybe there won't be as many enforcement issues, but the TRO will allow us to use enforcement as required.
There is another issue, Ian, which is relevant, which is where the electric vehicle owner leaves the vehicle on the charging point for an indefinite time period. And I use, with my electric car, I use what was called Polar, is now BP Chargemaster. And when you use their sites, if you're there for more than 90 minutes on a very rapid charging, they charge you a penalty fee, which is about £10 every quarter of an hour, something like that, to actually ensure that people do move off. But that your point is a valid one, Ian, and it does need to be enforced in all aspects. Do you want to pick up any more update on the consultation with SODC, Fiona?
I haven't really got anything further than that, other than to confirm that the working group's submission was made, and I had confirmation of that. It wouldn't normally be the case they would write back to everybody to say what changes have been made to the consultation, but I expect there'd be a general announcement as to what decisions have been made as a result of the consultation. So I will circulate those when they're available.
Okay. Morning, Donna. Right.
No.
Hi.
Apologies.
Fiona, would you like to just update the council strategy or the position on it?
Yes, so thanks to the Deputy Clerk for helping us chase up a response on where the situation is with Oxfordshire County Council, and there's good progress there, and in fact a draft strategy on electric vehicle charging infrastructure is now being sent to district level councils, and Tony and I have a meeting tomorrow with the lead officer on electric vehicle charging. We haven't yet received our own copy of the full draft strategy, but we'll have an opportunity to talk it through with her, and hopefully we'll receive that shortly. So good news that the progress is being made on that strategy, but we haven't seen the detail of it yet.
Okay. Thanks on that, Fiona. I will update you then on our review in terms of electric vehicle charging point infrastructure. You should have received an interim report from me as part of the papers. I think that's the case, Fiona, is that correct? Fiona, you did include the infrastructure report I did?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right, let me just talk it through then. This is in context of the government's announcement of banning sales of new, and I stress new, petrol and diesel cars from 2030 and hybrid vehicles from 2035. And it's a case of saying, how does the council respond to that announcement? In terms of my comments, I've identified 4 areas of risk. One is health and safety risks, where people use their own in-house power points and trail cables across the pavements. That could result in risk of trip injury claims against the council, as well as the car owners. we know that electric vehicles will reduce air pollution, so there's another health and safety risk there. And bear in mind the current coroner's inquest where a mother is suing the council or aiming to get the council to take responsibility for avoiding air pollution, if that's the right way of putting it. There's the political risk that I think that the leaders of the council need to consider about residents blaming the council strongly and loudly if they have an electric vehicle in advance of 2030 and unable to charge their cars. There's then what is my biggest concern, which is the risk of a social divide, that the streets without publicly provided charging points represent homes that tend to be smaller, may often be split in flats and have double lines. And that's a potentially social divisive. And I allude there to an adaptation of a World War I soldier's song that springs to my mind that perhaps could be described best of, you probably know the song is actually called She's Poor But She Was Honest. I won't go into the rest of it. But the phrase that I spring to mind is that we might be told that it's the rich what gets the chargers, it's the poor what gets the bus. And that is probably how it could work out. It's a big risk that we have a campaign on those lines. And then fourthly, an economic risk, which is that there is an income stream here. And if we don't take the opportunity, then we could lose a return on investment. So we talked about the other actions that we've taken so far on electric vehicle charging. What we did recently was to ask the members of the working group, the voluntary members, to actually go out and survey the streets with a view of identifying how many homes were based on didn't have off-street parking. In other words, they had to have on-street parking. And we've got about 4 sets of data through so far. I've done 2 of them, and that's the Grays Road and surrounding areas. And that's got 43% of homes that have not got off-street parking. We've also had, I did the area in the centre of Henley. That's got 44% of homes that have not got off-street parking. St Mark's Road is probably the best. It's only got 9%. And the Harpston Road and Vicarage Road has got about 37%, whereas places like the north, including Swiss Farm, is probably lower at 16%, but the one that is actually the biggest of the lot, with 65% of homes that have not got off-street parking, is Reading Road and that area. So you can see it tends to be the houses that are typically terraced or quite small that are without on-street parking. Not surprising. The question really is, how do we do an infrastructure strategy? And I think the interesting thing is, and this pertains to some of the possible elements that are included in the OCC strategy, which we'll see tomorrow. First of all, we have to have charging points that are installed directly on the curbside. What is interesting about Henley compared to some of the London boroughs is that where you have lampposts in London, they tend to be on the side immediately adjacent to the road, whereas in Henley, most of them are smaller pavements and they're away from the road. So even putting into lampposts, as it might be the case, you're likely to have trailing cables and therefore a risk of injury. The one question is that whether some of the private estates have got parking bays or even garages, how do we provide for those? And I'd say private estates, if you look at Gainsborough estate, that has largely got parking bays and actually garages. And the question is, if that's on highway, how is that actually provided for? And then there should be something for a residents only charging points. We're using what's called an RFID card to enable them to get preferential rates. One of the questions is, how do you fund this? And I think we should look at SIL money as means of possibly using that for the benefit of actually providing an infrastructure, which is what the SIL money, as I understand, is intended for, i.e. building capacity. So the question is, how does the council develop an infrastructure? We know where the key areas are. We will complete the surveys probably in the next 2 weeks, so we can identify the streets that are not an issue and would actually probably be off-street privately charged. But we've got to think about how it looks at those that are the areas that are at risk, and how it actually funds it, and who in the council actually does it. Are you offering to do that, Donna? I see you have your hand up.
No, I was just going to ask Kath a question, because, and Ian might know this as well, because SODC load of untapped SIL, don't they?
Yes, they've got £11 million worth of SIL funds.
Can we not use some of that for it?
Worth asking.
You'd be better at that than me, Ian.
Patrick?
Yeah, on that point, Sue Roberts, who's the chair of their climate emergency committee, said that I think that SODC would look favourably on any measures that would help SODC meet their climate target. So if we can pitch it that what we're doing is implementing this to help SODC meet their climate target, then it would be justifiable for SIL money from SODC.
Right, that's good.
Rebecca?
And the word on the street also is that they have so much SIL money, they hardly know what to spend it on. Isn't that right?
That's true, yes.
Those were Sue Roberts' words.
Kath, you had
yeah, the SODC have got a draft version of their SIL spending strategy, which would come into effect next April. And having talked to the officer there, or exchanged emails with the officer there, I think the idea is that projects, as Patrick was saying, projects that help, that are in line with their corporate plan would be looked favourably on for SIL funding. And it sounded from what the officer was saying that they weren't looking to do anything with it until next April, though that, in terms of putting a project together to apply for funding, it could easily take that long. But they did say that if we've got projects that were in line with their corporate plan now, then we could send them over to sort of make initial inquiries.
Donna?
So there's the other places that we identified that weren't suitable for funding. We could put them in place and get the funding for that with the SIL then. And there could be a lot of other places in Henley that we could identify to have put for parking.
I think there's a big issue. This is not a small scale thing which is dealt with by just adding a few car parks here and there. So far, the surveys that have been completed identify there's nearly 1,000 homes that have on-street parking. So that means 1,000 times at least 2 residents that may be without the ability to charge their cars, if they have them in 2030. Bear in mind that the need for car parking is not just by 2030, because it'll go on beyond that for those people that still have cars that are petrol or diesel at that time. But really, the council has to demonstrate that it has an infrastructure plan, whether it's with OCC or whether it's independent. But actually, it can't sit back, in my opinion, and just hope it'll be all right on the day. So what Kath, sorry, Fiona.
Sorry, just having difficulty unmuting there. Just to answer Councillor Crook's particular point, the 2 further projects, the 2 further sort of 4-point projects, small 4-point projects that we've got proposed, are on a fully funded by the supplier basis. So there isn't an upfront funding issue for those projects. But obviously, as Tony says, the much greater challenge is how to support the communities with no off-street parking, of which there's a very, very large number. So the monies would probably be needed for those projects rather than the ones that we've already got in chain. Yeah.
What I'd recommend, sorry, Patrick, go ahead.
Just to say that to give you an idea, the sort of projects we've got in line at the moment can use the existing supply network. They're trying to supply 1,000 or 2,000 on-street charging points. It's likely we're going to need a new network, which means that we're going to have the Zoom disturbance all over again as they trench to run in the cables to supply this. So, you know, it does need a lot of planning, and it also needs to be planned so that if we roll out 2,000 now, that there's a potential to add to that as more and more EVs come on the market, or come into use.
Okay. What I recommend is that probably we want to say that with some of the members of the working group and with Fiona / Kath, we start work on this to identify what the council needs to consider and actually build an approach that the council might plan over probably a 10-year to 15-year period, but actually to have that plan in place at the outset. If I'm happy to be part of that with Fiona / Kath. Jackie, would you be involved as well? Because that might be helpful, certainly looking in terms of your planning experience, but also the other areas outside Henley, you need to think about it as well. So how it's handled. And actually, the numbers I've given are just those without off-street parking. As I said, there are places that have got off-street parking, but they are not necessarily with electricity capability. So Patrick's comment is very valid. It shouldn't just be looking at the streets, because if people who are in private developments don't have the ability to charge, then they migrate into the areas which have got charging points which are intended for the local residents. So you've probably got more than 1,000 people. Are people happy for us to recommend that to the planning committee? That's been myself, Jackie, Kath and Fiona looking at it at the first instance. Yeah. Okay, let's take that as going forward. Sorry, Donna.
Yeah, also, I was speaking to, who's his name? Ramsey Adams the other day, and he was saying that some people are abusing the parking space in White Kings Road car park, because I think, is it free parking there where the electric charging point is?
I'm not certain. I don't think it is. I think you have to pay charging, but it's certainly free at certain times of the day.
There are people parking there that are not charging their cars.
Yeah. This is what Ian raised earlier about how do you enforce this position.
Sorry, yeah, I missed that.
No, it's a very valid point.
It's just stop people abusing it.
Yeah, agree. All right, let's.
It's Tony. It's Paul. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm on my phone, so I can't.
That's all right.
This isn't a Henley problem, obviously. This is a nationwide problem. You know, if the government are actually stipulating timescales for introducing electric cars, then surely they should have a strategy of how to roll EVs out as well. Have we heard anything on that?
I've not seen anything. Anyone else heard any comments about that? No. There's shaking your heads. I mean, I think you're very valid point, Paul, that actually that there is an issue about how does the government ensure there's an infrastructure in place. It isn't just Henley, but I think what I'm saying is that perhaps Henley is slightly different because of the numbers of smaller houses, smaller properties. And as a consequence, we've got to think about the needs of our residents in that context.
Yeah, but I imagine, you know, Newtown in Reading would have similar issues. Yeah. I mean, this is something really that it's good that we're obviously doing work on this and investigating it, but it should be a nationwide policy and actually nationwide funding for this, surely. But obviously, it's not something we're going to solve in this meeting. But we should probably investigate what their plans are. We could maybe even ask our MP.
That's a good point. Yeah, take that.
We could
Why
do.
do everyone smile when you say that?
Ian?
I was going to say Paul's exactly right, and maybe talking to the chair of the SODC, escalating this upwards as an issue, asking what it is that is being done, whether there is a national scheme being proposed, and how what we're doing at town level would fit into that scheme, including funding through use of SIL. So does it make sense to communicate with the someone mentioned the name earlier, the chair of the
Sue
Roberts.
Yeah.
Sue Roberts, and ask for what's happening both at district level but also at national level, as Paul says, on this issue, because it will need a national strategy and national funding. It seems obvious that's the case.
Patrick?
Yeah, I would ask that you take that with OCC, because if the government's going to delegate it to anyone, it's going to be to the highways authorities. And so they may have had communication from central government, they may not. And I think either way, that will be indicative of what's going to happen in the future. I have a feeling that the government is expecting car manufacturers and highways authorities to do it all for them. And they'll just set the rules. But maybe I'm slightly cynical on that one.
Rebecca, you had a...
I agree with Paul. I mean, obviously, things like major trunk roads, they're going to make sure that there's the ability to charge your car, isn't there? But I suspect that the government is also depending to a certain extent on the private sector. I mean, I heard on the radio this morning of a petrol station that is now no longer a petrol station, but a charging station. And that will inevitably happen, won't it? As petrol stations have less use, and they are going to be turned into charging stations. So I suspect the government is also expecting that there will be a role for the private sector too.
I probably think you're right. Should we move off this? I think Paul's suggestion and Ian's suggestion is quite valid. Let's actually, first of all, wait until tomorrow to receive the feedback from OCC. And then after that, let's approach SODC and ask them what their plans are, and also take up the point about SIL money that might be available within SODC for this purpose, and not just in Henley, but other parts of SODC as well. Okay, let's move on then to the progress and other projects. There's a paper that was written by Claudia and reviewed by myself and Patrick. Claudia can't be here because of her problem with the mother being in hospital. Patrick, could you perhaps talk it through?
Do you want to? We've got other projects first, and then the new building regs. Do you want me to?
I'm sorry. Okay. Right. Would you like to talk about retrofit support and what you're doing on this? Perhaps Rebecca is the first instance.
Well, in terms of retrofit support, so we've been doing Green Homes grant. So we had a Cozy Homes Zoom that Patrick came to and Claudia came to last week. Cozy Homes coordinators. Cozy Homes seems to have got its act together a little bit, which is good because Patrick and I received a letter of complaint from one of the first people to have had a Cozy Homes survey. But that seems to have been dealt with. But they do seem to be getting their act together now, and they've had a number of surveys done and people waiting for work to be done. They said that the Green Homes grant has created a massive demand in the market, which has simply overwhelmed all the existing suppliers, with the result that some are now actually taking their names and contact details off the website because they just can't cope with the level of demand, which is a great shame. The Green Homes grant has now been extended for a further year, so hopefully that might mean that the whole thing is then evened out a little bit more. The chap from Retrofit Works said that, he wasn't very keen on the Green Homes grant approach because he felt it would encourage people to do things which weren't necessarily the best things to do. But on the other hand, the government is seeing it as a way of stimulating the market. So it's, you know, there are different viewpoints. Clearly, there's a big issue with, there just may be an opportunity here, because there's a big issue with the fact that they just don't have enough people to do the work. And to get the quality mark that you need is a certain amount of cost involved and time, which a lot of contractors, if they're already very busy with work, don't feel particularly the need to go and get. On the other hand, there are people being made redundant, and there's going to be, unfortunately, an awful lot of unemployment next year. So there is an opportunity in one part of the economy whilst other parts of the economy contract. So there may be an opportunity here to try to encourage people to train in new areas. And he was talking about a new apprenticeship programme that was starting. I can't quite remember, where was it? I think maybe somewhere like Reading or Oxford. Patrick?
No, it's Whitney in Abingdon College.
It was Whitney in Abingdon College, that was it, wasn't it?
And it's starting in Bicester, but it's an initiative that SODC are supporting. So
yeah. So I thought that was really great, because there will be a huge shortage of those types of skills in Oxfordshire. So in terms of kind of retrofit, I think that is largely where we are. I mean, I think the Cosy Homes, my certainly feeling at the end of the Cosy Homes Advocates meeting was that I was pretty comfortable with it, and thought that we could now start recommending it. I mean, they came out, I was quite surprised actually, because he said that the bundle of measures, the average spend was £24,000, which is a huge amount, a huge sum. And whereas he hadn't thought that that was an issue with the people that had so far been attracted, that will be an issue if this is to be any kind of mass market thing, because that's a price point that is too high for most people. So there will be that issue to look at. But I thought overall it was fairly encouraging. Certainly it was something I thought we could now go out with confidence to be able to advertise. I don't know, Patrick, what did you think?
Yeah, put it in perspective, 24,000 is just about half the cost of truly converting an existing home to zero carbon. So what we're looking at is a few people that can afford to spend from their own money enough to half convert their home. I think that puts it in perspective. My feeling coming out from the meeting that we had with Cosy Homes is we've got a huge PR exercise that we need to kick off. It's not just a little bit of a PR exercise, it's an enormous PR exercise. And I think that's something we as a committee should consider, is if we want to encourage people in Henley and the area to convert homes, then we need to persuade them to do it, and to make them understand that the risk has been removed by going down the Cosy Homes route, where they will have the whole project supervised for them. I think that's a key selling point for this. The other thing that just to mention that the MD of Retrofit Works, when in his presentation to meeting, said that the Green Homes grant is perverse, in that what's happened is that the real craftsmen have cleared off, and as Rebecca said, they've taken their contact details off the website because they're overloaded, and it's allowed the cowboys to come in, and they are now just adding £5,000 to the cost of the work because they're going to get it back as a grant. So the homeowners are actually losing out, and they're not losing out, but they are losing out because the better craftsmen have gone elsewhere. So I think we've got again, the Cosy Homes scheme it slows the process down, but it does give a guarantee that they will select the craftsmen people to do the job. So I think it's really important from that point of view. So that PR and a marketing campaign is absolutely key, and quite how we do that, who does it, is something that we need to address.
Rebecca, perhaps you and I can discuss that item, that aspect of communications later, okay? What we also agreed in the last informal working group was that we would actually talk to Housing Association about perhaps doing a trial of retrofit. And I've got to take that action forward. Fiona, sorry.
I just wanted to remind the working group that the Green Homes grant is still promoted on Henley Town Council website. Obviously, I think I should update the page with the information, a bit more information about the scheme. But it seems sensible, even though there are difficulties for some people, it is still a way forward. So I just wanted to confirm that you're happy for me to leave the Green Home grants on the council webpage.
Patrick?
Could I ask that we promote on the council webpage the Cozy Home scheme, and to say that
Patrick, let's just hold on a second. Can Rebecca and myself just talk it through and think about how we communicate, and that maybe put it on the council website. I agree with you. But
the one point I wanted to make was a point that that was made in our meeting, is that it's a whole house plan rather than just odd specific measures. Because what they're finding is they're actually having to undo work that people have had done, where they've had double glazing put in or whatever. So it's a different approach, and it's getting that message across to people. I think rather than just getting them to do the odd single measure, which the Green Homes grant is tending to encourage people to do, is a message somehow to try and persuade people to do it properly.
Can I bear in mind Ian's leaving us in about 6 minutes' time? Can we just leave items 2, 3, and 4 on this progress of other projects? And can you go straight to new building regulations now, if that's all right, Patrick?
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to do that, because actually it speaks to it. There's a comprehensive paper here that Claudia particularly put together, and Tony had quite a bit of input into, and it's we're putting it forward as a discussion document. It's not a mandate. We want the planning committee to do this. It's a discussion document, because I think there is a need for dialogue between the climate working group and the planning committee on this. There's a great deal of technical information in this paper, and I would feel that before it goes before the planning committee, that we have, if possible, a briefing meeting, at least with Michelle, possibly with Ken, and just to introduce it so they understand what is coming. It's unfortunate Ken's not able to make this call. So I would ask perhaps if we could set up a briefing meeting so that we can at least make them aware of what is in this and what's coming. I think, just to give you an idea of how important it is, it's 25% of our carbon footprint is buildings and heating, and so if we don't crack this, we're not going to crack the whole carbon footprint. It is absolutely vital. And what prompted this really is frustration with the government, with the slippage on the new regulations. I don't know if you're aware, but building regulations are meant to have been tightened up this year. They were meant to have been introduced mid-year, so that they would be in full force by November. Now, we haven't even seen them yet, so there's already a 6-month slippage, and that's only for the beginning. This is an interim that was meant to be easy to introduce. The main regulations will come into force in 2025. So as a result of this, Claudia has put together this paper, and I think what's really important, there's one other caveat, and that is that it hasn't taken into account the local plan. And we've got an emerging local plan, which is going to be voted on next week at SODC, and if introduced, will actually do more for this whole paper than the government can do. And the reason for that is that in the local plan, there's a proposal to, in fact, its policy, BES 11, has been introduced by the inspector, which gives a 40% cut to carbon over the 2013 building regulations. And I think that's something else I think that we should consider as a committee, is helping the planning, so as a working group, is helping the planning committee to produce a briefing document which actually explains what that means, because it doesn't just apply to the likes of Highlands Park, it applies to an individual building an extension to their building. There's an obligation to reduce carbon footprint of that particular extension by 40%. So that's a key point that we need to introduce. When Claudia put this paper together, she was looking for a 20% reduction in carbon emissions over the current building regs. And so you can see that the SODC local plan is more ambitious than that, and it's also progressive. There will be further steps through the life of the plan to improve this. So there's a key point that we do need to have this dialogue with planning to make sure that they're aware of exactly what regulations can be enforced at any point, and so that's an important step forward. There's another key point that she's brought up in here is that in planning terms and in building terms, there's what's called a performance gap, which means that when an architect designs a house, they design it with a certain energy efficiency. The builder builds it and the homeowner moves in. First of all, the developers police their own building regs. So that means that they can pass off and sign off on measures that have been put in that they feel they can get away with. And so then what happens is the homeowner comes in and they live in the house, and surprise, surprise, it doesn't actually meet the regulations that have been that it's meant to have met. So I think there's another aspect of this that comes in, and this is brought up to a degree in this paper, and that is that we need a way of policing this, so that when we get a developer putting forward that they are going to meet the regulations, and in fact now meet the new local plan regulations, the policies, then we need some kind of a feedback in the contract, in the clauses, in the planning permission that says yes, okay, but it needs testing. So I think that it's really important that we drive that through, and that planning takes a proactive role in putting that in place. So planning permissions given should have a clause in them that say that they not just what the developers are passing off as being acceptable when they check for building regs, but also what's actually happening when the houses are occupied. We come on to new build private housing, I think we dealt with, but the new build social housing, I think we're in an interesting point with our neighbourhood plan, where we have the potential for the next period of the neighbourhood plan to look at social housing. And with that, I think that we, as a council and the planning committee, and also through the neighbourhood plan, can actually stipulate much tighter regulations on the build of social housing. And what we would like to see is zero carbon homes. That means that people in fuel poverty are no longer in fuel poverty because they don't need to heat their homes. And that would be a huge step forward for social housing. So I think that, as we have this discussion with planning, I think to develop that as a concept, and to also to have the conversation. I know we're talking with ourselves to a certain extent, because Rebecca, Jackie and I are responsible for including policies in the new neighbourhood plan, but those policies could include covering social housing and having them specified as zero carbon homes. So I think that's something that I'd like to discuss and have a conversation with planning, with Ken as the chair of the neighbourhood planning committee, and with Fiona as the officer in charge. So I think that's a really important point to bring up. So there's a call for action at the end of the paper. It identifies that changing building regs is not something that we can really influence. That's essentially down to Genric and his crew, and what will come out of it was what will come out of it. As we discovered, we have very little influence over his department. But taking a proactive approach, I think, is something we want to encourage the planning committee to do. Not just looking reactively at planning applications as they come in, but also looking at preparing developers and builders for what they should be doing, and also looking at just how much through the neighbourhood plan we can actually influence what developers and builders do by introducing policies in the neighbourhood plan. And we are open at the moment to do that. It's an important thing that we ought to do. The last paragraph of the document, or the penultimate paragraph, is going to be a challenge, and that is to have a restricted list of builders and developers that we would work with. We would like to do that, but I think we need to approach that in a slightly different way. And again, the discussion with Ken on this would be very helpful, chair of the neighbourhood plan group, because as we go to consider sites, we can consider sites that meet our objectives and needs for meeting our climate emergency. And I think that's quite a reasonable thing to do. Finally, the final paragraph is that members of the Climate Emergency Working Group would be happy to work with council officers to develop subsequent documents. And I think that that is key. We are already doing it with the neighbourhood plan, the climate policies in the neighbourhood plan. And I think what I'm suggesting is another document, which is a briefing document for the planning committee. So when they're considering planning applications, they understand just what policies do apply and just what scope they have is a really important one. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, for that. Before I throw it open for discussion, can I just reinforce the point about this energy performance gap? Rebecca and I went to one building looking at potential solar panels, and the person responsible there said they had a new build whereby it's only been open about 6 months, and yet already it's performing 60% worse than design in terms of energy performance. And this is a major building, and it highlights the point that Claudia and Patrick made, which is that it's not just getting it right at the stage of planning permission, it's enforcing it right the way through to actual performance. Ian.
Patrick's given a very helpful and a more complete expansion of the paper, particularly on the need for the planning system to be informed of the rules and the opportunities and the mechanisms by which we can mitigate the carbon emissions. And that was very helpful. I was concerned that the document had a slightly over-optimistic view of the town council's planning role. It's not a tertiary, what's the phrase? It's not a tertiary authority. It's a statutory consultee. And as Donna, who sits on plans and I don't, knows, we're by no means always followed with our recommendations and views. And so we have to, I completely agree, Patrick's put it very well, that it's important to inform the planning committee of these things, draw up documents, have a formalised strategy, so that there's a framework there for the town council to pursue the objectives of the Climate Emergency Working Group. The main vehicle, I think, where there is genuine traction that could be gained is the neighbourhood plan, and Patrick's mentioned that a few times. Yeah. It's not mentioned in the document, but the neighbourhood plan is a place where we can put in clear views about the nature of the buildings that we want to see approved and built in the town, and and the way in which that reflects the provisions of the local plan, which I think Patrick's right, is probably more important at the moment than anything that's going to come through from the national authority. So I completely agree that if Patrick and others go and brief Ken, Michelle and other members of the planning committee, that would be a very useful process. But we should be realistic about the places that we can achieve a place where our views will make a real difference. The planning system is somewhat slippery.
Mm.
Donna, you have a comment.
Yeah, see, I've got my train of thought now. See, my concern is we'll say no because of the thing, but then SODC may go ahead and approve it, because there's one particular development I think is an environmental disaster that wants to be proposed, but I have this fear that SODC may go ahead and approve it, and it will cause a great environmental damage. Take, for instance, Thames Farm. That's a real environmental damage, and for SODC to then go and give it the go-ahead to be built without any thought to the impact on the residents in Lower Shiplake is absolutely appalling. You know, but what can we do if we decline it or something because we think it's going to be an environmental disaster and everything? And we just feel a bit like, well, we don't have any say in that if SODC are going to approve something.
Perhaps in addition to taking this and briefing Michelle and Ken, we should also think about how we communicate it to SODC, perhaps again through Sue Roberts. Patrick.
Yeah, I think that Thames Farm is an example to us of what we shouldn't do. And I think that being informed about policies and about, you have to almost take a planning officer's approach to understand, get into their way of thinking. So taking consultancy from the planning officer so that we can get behind their minds, and any objections that we put in are then put in with the view to persuade the planning officer. I think that's key, because just we know what we want for Henley and for the surrounding area. That's in our hearts, but that doesn't count for anything. As Ian said, it's a very slippery issue.
Yes.
And where it does work is where you bring to the planning officer chapter and verse of planning policy, so that they can write that into their report, so that when it goes to appeal, it's there as evidence of why the decision was made, and it can be upheld through the whole chain, because it's not just the first ruling of the planning officer, it's then the first appeal, the second appeal, and so on and so on. Anything we put in place has to stand the test of that, and has to be we have to be able to uphold it. So I think the more information we spread out and the more informed decisions we make at each stage, the more likely we are to succeed with what we want to achieve.
Let's go to.
It's worth noting that we do have a planning officer now, Jodie, who's you can regard her as a poacher turned gamekeeper.
Yes.
But we precisely employed her so we could get the planning officer's input to our objections, frame them with the right form of words, and make sure that the planning officer's decisions were robust in law.
If we go to Rebecca, before we do that, Kath and Fiona, when is the next planning committee if we're going to try and brief Michelle and Ken?
Yeah, the next planning committee is the 15th of December, I think, Kath. And so I'm thinking that although because the working group today is not core, we can't resolve to adopt the paper, that Tony as the chair would still be able to submit it to the planning committee for consideration. Does that sound all right, Kath? Sorry to put you on the spot, but yes, we need a way forward with this paper.
I think it. Yes, I think it could still go to planning committee for consideration if that's what we want to put directly to planning committee, or do we want to do any further work on it and possibly consult with Jodie beforehand?
Perhaps we should do Jodie and Ken and Michelle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Strongly agree.
Sorry, Rebecca, you had a question then, and Kathy, Jackie, and Ian. What time are you leaving?
About 10 minutes ago.
Okay. Good to see you.
Sorry about that, Ian.
It's okay. I was going to say that, I mean, in terms of presenting the paper, we can say that this is the current working model. We're continuing to refine it, and after discussions with senior members of the town council, planning officers, and councillors, it will continue to be refined into a final recommendation. I think that it's fine to present it to planning in those terms.
Okay, thanks for that, Ian. Rebecca.
So thanks very much for the meeting. Sorry I can't stay.
Take care.
Thanks, Ian.
Bye-bye.
And I was going to say, in terms of, I mean, if we really want to get new build housing in Henley built to a higher standard, obviously we need to influence the right building regulations. And Ian is quite right that the neighbourhood plan is our best place for doing that, where we can say that we want something that is higher than national building regulations. But actually, if SODC, if the local plan is going to be higher regulations in terms of energy efficiency than we're already putting forward in this paper, then we have already been superseded by what the local plan is doing in a good way.
Yeah. Tony, can I speak to that?
Yes, please.
So, yeah, Rebecca, so the challenge we've been given, so you, me and Jackie, is that we've now got to take these new regulations, DES 11, well, DES 8, 9, 10 and 11, and we've got to understand where the gaps are. And this is a discussion we had. We had a very constructive meeting. Fiona, Jodie and I had a very constructive meeting with Dan Stone from the Centre for Sustainable Energy. And he is, if we can contract him to do the work, then we've got the right person. Because what he's done is he explained to us that we take the local plan policies, we identify where it doesn't quite match what we want to do in Henley. For instance, with our social housing, and that's what the policies that we put. We don't try and duplicate, because they'll just get chucked out. We don't try and duplicate what the local plan is saying. The examiner will just cut it out. Or the inspector will cut it out in examination. So what we do need to do is identify the gaps, the mortar that needs to be put in between those bricks of the local plan policies. So a bit of a challenge for us, but the more evidence we collect from planning, from this committee, the more we can actually do that.
So before we go to Donna, Jackie, you had a hand up earlier.
Yes, I think all's been said really from my side, but it was to support that we're not corporate, and this piece of work would benefit from speaking with Jodie and Ken. So I think Ian's recommendation on how to put it forward at the next planning committee, I would agree with.
Okay, Donna?
Yeah, I've just had a bit of a thought about how social housing, new build social housing, because I'm just have a little bit of concern of how much that would drive up the cost of building each new social housing build, whether it would then put...
Rebecca can answer that one.
I can answer that one. On Saturday morning, we're going over to see a development called Springfield Meadows, which you're very welcome to come to if you're available. It is in Kingston Bagpuys. It's partly social housing, partly private housing. The builder got it built to zero carbon standards at less than they could build conventional.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, great. Yeah. I'm just concerned it would then be an excuse they'd use to not build the social housing, and whether there could have been some sort of grant that there is to mitigate that. You know, so that's fantastic. That's great.
Rebecca, would you?
You're welcome to come if you want to come.
Will you send her the details, Rebecca?
Yeah, of course I will.
Thank you very much. Okay, Patrick, thank you very much for taking time to go through that paper developed originally by Claudia. I think I will make a note. I'll invite Michelle and Ken perhaps to talk, and then Jodie separately. Fiona, would you like to be participating in those discussions? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. I will take that action immediately after this. Can we go back to the progress and other projects? And to give you a breather, Patrick, can we go to solar streets first of all, and then I'll take energy audit. Rebecca?
Solar streets. So Andy had another Zoom. He didn't find an awful lot of interest. I think maybe it's time of year, maybe there wasn't quite the same push as before. So he's starting again next year. Meanwhile, I've had quite a number of people contact me asking me about solar streets, wanting to do it in their town. They've got a similar thing going on in Didcot, Tame, Farringdon, Marlow, as far as I know now. Maybe there might be some more now. So it's quite good. So the whole idea is spreading quite quickly. So that's where we are.
Like Rebecca, I've had lots of councillors contacting me for testimonials on solar streets. That's been worthwhile. Well, I do know of one councillor who's taking on solar streets project, and could be quite a visible location, so that's quite good. Energy audits, we've had energy audits in YMCA and also in D2. I don't know the results as yet, they were about a week ago, and that's what we've agreed is that when we get the results, we should find some way about publicising our activity in them and actually talk about what might be feasible for those locations. Those two projects were funded from our own membership of Low Carbon Hub and also that of Greener Henley. Separately, we've talked with Valley Road about potentially having an energy audit, and subsequently looking at providing some grants towards energy efficiency improvements. We've also made that offer to the two surgeries, and Rebecca has now had an indication about how that can be funded through a separate avenue, and that would be free of charge. And I think doing the energy audits has been worthwhile. We've got to make it clear to people that we've been doing it, and that perhaps is an example of how they should actually think if there are a commercial or community building going forward. Patrick, would you like to take upon trees?
Yeah. So trees, really three approaches. And there may be another one. Initially, I'll start with three. First of all, thanks to Kath for introducing me to a consultant who was with MAF back in the day, and who taught me through a lot of useful information about local context, local structure, and so on. And we've got a couple, I think, of landowners or farmers, tenant farmers or landowners that we can contact when the time is right. And something that he stressed is that building up a portfolio and having a good sales pitch is absolutely critical, because farmers are incredibly skeptical. They have to be. They haven't got much, they don't have time, and they often don't have that much money. And so, you know, I'm taking that approach forward. We will start to talk to these contacts and try and develop others as well. I think it's essential, what he said is word of mouth is key. And so having someone that can refer you on is the key way, and that's how we've had success so far. So that work will go on to develop and to build up. Speaking of landowners, and we're currently doing tree planting in Medmenham, which is not only out of parish, but it's out of county, but it is local, and the landowner there is very happy for us to plant. And we planted 100 shrubs. They're hedging shrubs. We planted them on Friday. We're planting another 100 this Friday, and there'll be another 300 or 400 going in before Christmas. Oh, sorry, a total of 300 or 400 before Christmas, and another 700 in January.
Wow.
So just that one landowner, we're talking about 11 or 1,200 shrubs and trees going in. And that indicates the kind of scope of what we can do. I have to say, I've given up with engaging with the town council. I think Fiona is going to be, with my help, we're going to develop a tree plan, and that's the right way forward. Previously, I was badgering them to find spots where we could plant trees, and that's the wrong approach. I think that now, with Fiona's help, we're going to, I should say Fiona, with my help, we're going to do it the right way. And that is to develop an overall tree strategy for the whole estate of Henley Town Council. Both the tree replacement, bearing in mind that they're probably getting, I would guess they're having 100 trees a year falling down or being cut down at least. So it's not just, we're going to have to run to stay still, but it's also then getting up to that figure of 1,000 trees a year, which is my target for the parish of Henley. So that's the oh yes, by the way, on that one we planted 500 trees. We planted 300 of them, no, 200 on Henley Town Council land, around 40-acre field, 100 of them on one of the other landowners around 40-acre field, and 200, and this is what's really heartening, on the Henley College grounds. And I actually had the principal of Henley College came out and walked up to the tennis courts by their car park on Tilbarn Close, and she looked for herself to see what we'd done, and she was very pleased and explained that. What I'm hoping is that we, that's Greener Henley, but the Climate Working Group and Henley Town Council, can form a community college partnership, essentially, with the Henley College, to promote not just this, but to promote other work that we want to do. And I think that, is it Satwan, the principal anyway, was very keen that we did this. So that's work for Rebecca and for me to do, is to trade on that and to build up so that she understands that we are a resource, as well as being, interested in sustainability. We are a resource that she can use as well.
It seems to me that what you're doing is quite a sizable set of actions. And bear in mind your point about word of mouth. I think we ought to be communicating this.
Well, I think actually, again, it comes down to PR and about having a PR policy. So I think it would be good to develop a PR plan as to how we communicate this and how we get it to the right ears, so that people start to understand that we've scaled up from a couple of hundred trees on private land last year to 1,200 trees this year, and we want a few thousand next year. I've got a promise of resource for 2,000 trees in October of next year. The Ribbon Communications are prepared to have it as their activities day. And they've got Brian, who's my contact there, has said that they want to go for 2,000 trees. So if we can find a local landowner who needs 2,000 trees planting, we've got the labour force to do it. But it's you can't just go gung ho at it. It's a question of developing that as an idea. The one other
Have you got some nice?
Sorry?
Have you got some nice photos of yourself standing by the trees with a shovel?
Not yet. No. That's a good point.
That's what we need.
Yes.
It is.
I think we can get some from the Ribbon Day. We can talk to them and ask them for photographs, particularly for the Henley College, and that would be really good. But I will try and get more photographs. I have to say, when you're digging holes in the ground and putting trees in them, I don't immediately reach on my phone and take a photograph of it. I'm old school. I'm not new generation. I'm not continually taking selfies of what I'm doing. So yeah, it is a problem. But yes, I take that point.
If you let us know when you're digging holes, Patrick, we'll come and take the photograph.
Okay, all right.
We'll come and take the photos.
Yeah. I hope, this is the problem actually of not doing things in Henley. Last year we were doing things on the Chalk Bank, Marsh Meadows. It was all more photogenic. We could get the Henley Standard and the Henley Herald down, and we got some publicity. Because we're working out of parish, out of county, that becomes more difficult. I can't really get the Henley standard scraped all the way over to Medmenham.
We'll take the photographs, Patrick. Don't worry.
What?
We'll take the photographs. Give us the date.
Okay. I don't think this Friday at 9 o'clock it's going to be absolutely tipping with rain. I don't think anyone's going to want to take any photographs of it. But
are you going to be there Friday?
What?
Are you going to be there Friday?
Yeah.
We'll be there.
Okay. We've got one of our team who won't be photographed, but we can work around that. The other area which is really important, and which actually is good to the Fiona and Kath here, is mapping. And we've been working with Tim Richards of Terra Sulis, who are a consultancy who've been working with Friends of the Earth. And in fact, if you go on the Friends of the Earth website, you can see now a tree opportunity map, which is not really very good. But we've been working with Tim, and I've explained what we want, and what he's developing for us are parish maps. And we already have maps for Bixen Assendon, Grays and Henley, which show the tree opportunities. And we've overlaid them with information from DEFRA on soil type, because there's an issue with tree planting that you can actually destroy habitat in doing what you're doing. So we've got an overlay for calcareous soil, which is the chalk banks, so that we try and avoid those where possible. Or if we don't, what we can do is call in a consultant to come and to tell us whether it's a significant habitat or not. So there's a process developing, and it's really important. But the key thing that Tim is doing for us now is he's going to generate these maps with the Inspire information from the land registry. So when we see an opportunity, we can find the Inspire number, put that in, pay our 12 quid, and get the land registry documents for that particular plot. So that's really tying in with what we've got budget for, and what we would like to do in the very near future. I'd say that's coming up in the next month. We're going to start feeding through some Inspire numbers, and it would be very helpful if someone in the town hall could go onto the land registry and download the documents for us and pay the 12 quid. I think they're £6 each, aren't they, Kath? Yeah. And then that will give us the information on land ownership, and it should also give us information on long-term tenancy as well. We may have to go a bit further, but it's all part of the story. It tells us who we can approach, and it also gives us credibility when we go to approach a farmer. If we say, we see that 50% of your soil is calcareous, so we're probably not going to go there, but you've got this soil here, which is low-grade agricultural land, but which is appropriate for tree planting, they will take us seriously, because obviously we spent time on it and we are personalizing it to them. So that's where we are at the moment with trees.
That's very good, Patrick. Thank you on that. Just send us the location and we'll agree who takes photograph. I don't mind going there for 9 o'clock on Friday. But let's move on then to item 8, which is the project action plan. First of all, about the carbon footprint of the town council, and then the action plan from the impacts paper. So Fiona, could you talk to that, please?
I wanted to remind the working group that at our last meeting we agreed an action plan. We agreed, sorry, an impacts paper that now needs to be developed into an actions plan, and that work is just beginning. So I don't have any particular progress on that, but clearly the first or key step within that is to make sure that we have detailed figures about the carbon footprint of Henley and of the council in particular. So I thought it was particularly important to raise for Councillor Crook in this occasion to be aware that whilst Henley obviously has a very strong grip of its finances, we know how much we're spending on energy. the council, like most other town councils, hasn't yet developed a process for knowing where it's spending carbon, where its key kind of carbon footprint elements are. So something that obviously we will be developing in the future is how to do that, and it's just perhaps it's something that councillors can be aware of when they're discussing new projects, that increasingly the carbon footprint of that project needs to be something that's taken account of and considered. And if councillors are asking more information about what the carbon footprint of a project is, that gives us more focus and incentive to develop a management system that answers that question in a more systematic way. That was just the point I thought it was useful to make at this stage. Thank you.
Well, we do. Sometimes we don't have agendas printed out for us, like this one isn't printed out for us. So that saves the council quite a lot of printing time. You see, there are some that do require printing out because it's quite long, and some people aren't so good with computers. Yeah, myself included. Also technically minded as others, but yeah, there are a lot of paperwork. We do have an awful lot of paper, but we are cutting down on that.
I think the point that Fiona's making in particular is the fact that the council may actually manage its financial budget, but it doesn't measure the inputs of energy. And if you're going to try and manage your carbon footprint, you need to be able to understand where you are in terms of volumes, first of all. And that's what the council's got to get to grips with.
I think we haven't spent so much on electricity this year, have we? Because we haven't been having face-to-face meetings, so that might cut down carbon. Is that something? Is that?
It may be the case, but no one knows.
Yeah. And the heating the town hall, are we, Kath? You would know.
Patrick,
I've got a question for Fiona. I think these are all good steps, but it sounds as though there isn't a plan behind it at the moment as to how we're going to drive it through.
Right.
Do you feel you need to have some support so that there's something we can go to the town clerk with to say, this is what we're doing, this is when we're going to want to have these, some procedures and processes in place to inform councillors or to mandate sometimes that the carbon must be considered in every council decision?
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot more work to do. And what I expect to have before Christmas is, a bit more time to think about that, to come up with a clearer way forward. But at the moment, but thank you very much for offers of support and help. At the moment, what I need is a little bit of time to think about it, I think.
To give one example, Donna, I have been working with Fiona on this carbon footprint, and I had a list of vehicle fuel used. And then I happened to be down the meadows with our dog when she was alive. And I saw one of the park services vehicles, the registration number of which was not on this list at all. So there's no one actually checking what is the actual consumption for vehicles like that.
Yeah, I think they are, unfortunately, I think they are diesel, but because it was, the fact is that it cuts down, I know it sounds awful, because it cuts down on, because they need the vehicles to get the workers to the place, it cuts down on time and everything. Yeah, that is, I would personally love an electric vehicle, but we don't have the budget for that. And there isn't the technology, or, well, I'm sure Kyle would be able to be, Carl, is it Carl? Carl would be the best. Because it's like the efficiency of the vehicle. And it is something, but I think financial budgets restrict us, unfortunately, at the moment, until there's something developed that's cheaper to buy. We're stuck really with that. But it does cut down on man hours if they're able to transport people to different places, so it gets work done. So it saves us.
Fiona?
But the challenge then is it's difficult for the council to know whether it's better to seek some funding to upgrade its diesel vehicles to electric, say, or to insulate the town hall. We just at the moment we don't know where exactly, where the priorities should be without that information about. So that's what we need to work on. That's what we need to get to grips with.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the potential sites for solar panels, if that's all right. And then in that respect, can you cut out the YouTube, please?